All right, well, it's a pumpkin kind of day here at Do the Math. So once again, we want to say thank you to Sophia and Mackenzie for carving our lovely pumpkins for KCSOS and Do the Math. And there are a lot of kids out there that might be carving their own pumpkin for the very first time. Do remember, safety first at home and wherever you're carving a pumpkin. So you want to make sure that you have adults around with you and take all safety precautions, especially because you'll be using some sharp implements as you are carving out the pumpkins. So you can see one that we've got right here all finished, and we'll talk a little bit about the pumpkin right now. So we talked a little bit about the parts of a pumpkin earlier. So up at the top, we've got the stem of the pumpkin, we've got the shell of the pumpkin, which is the outside. So if you're thinking about the earth, kind of, you could think about this as the crust of the earth. You've got the mantle, you've got the pulp on the inside, which is a little bit thicker. That's the difficult part to kind of get through. Once you crack that shell, then you can get into that pulp. Then once you figure out what you want to do as far as your design, as far as the eyes, nose, mouth, and other things that you want to add on that, then you can get into the creative part. One of the things you're going to need, though, is to first of all make sure that you need to have the proper tools. So we've got an assortment of tools here. So we've got a couple that are like miniature saws. And a lot of times these are a little bit easier to work with instead of just knives because they are smaller. They've got a larger handle on them, and they're pretty sturdy in order to work with. And a lot of times if you are a bit younger and it's a little bit more difficult for you to get these into the pumpkin through that shell, that's when you want to have an adult work with you at the first time. And there are some times when you can kind of make a design with a little pointer, and you can kind of come up with a design, and there's a lot of times where you can copy things and trace them, and then just put that paper right on the pumpkin and poke those holes into the outside of the pumpkin, and then it makes it easier to scoop or cut out when you want to do it. Then there are obviously some other types of tools that you can use. This one I'm going to stay away from. Kind of reminds me of a dangerous saw, I guess, because it's going to go flying. It reminds me of a spur, actually, on a Western boot. Then you need the scoop. Now this is an optional thing, because I remember as a kid we didn't have a scoop. And there were times when you might use a spoon to do that, but a lot of times it was just get in there with your hands and you're just going to dig it out, and you used your hands and your fingernails, and that was it. Now, when you do that, all of this lovely stuff, right? Because we can see that we've got our math right here, okay? And when we cut out the different shapes on the pumpkin earlier, but you see all of this stuff, right? And this is the stuff that when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, this is the stuff that you want to get, right? So you've got the seeds, and you've got, I mean, there's just no other way about it than just to call it stuff and guts, right? And one of the jokes I remember some kid told me was like, why was the pumpkin afraid to cross the road? Well, he didn't have the guts. See, the guts were already out, right? So it would have been something like that. Anyway, those of you that got it, great. But let's go back to our pumpkin that we were looking at earlier. So as far as the designs went, we wanted to make sure that the pumpkin had some geometric shapes and organic shapes. So there's a difference between those. So we can see that the eyes, we have a square and we have a triangle up on the top. So those are the two eyes that we've got. So we can see when we cut them out, so the shapes, we've got a square and a triangle. Now there's some different things that you can do with shapes like this. So you can first of all figure out the perimeter, right? You can figure out the area. And when you're figuring out the area of a triangle, that is 1/2 the length times width. Because if you want to do the area of a square, it's just length times width, and those numbers would all be the same. But if you have a rectangle, those two numbers are going to be a little different. A triangle is 1/2 of a square, so that's why it's 1/2 length times width. Circles, that's a big one, because when we talk about Pi Day in the middle of March, Pi Day is coming up a few months, but when you want to figure out the two different things about a circle, you've got the circumference of a circle and you've got the area of a circle. So for the circumference of a circle, you want to go 2 pi r. For the area of a circle, you're using the same three things, but you're putting them in a different order. Instead of multiplying by 2, you're using the 2 as an exponent, because now you're doing area. So instead of 2 pi r for circumference, you're doing pi r squared for the area. Down at the bottom, you can see that we have some organic shapes. And the one that we have, this is purely organic. There's no description to otherwise describe that, otherwise it's just an organic shape. The other one that we've got also counts as an organic shape because there's nothing as far as geometric about it other than it's symmetrical. So a heart, you can see, has one line of symmetry right down the middle from the top to the bottom, because then it's identical on both sides. You cannot cut it across any other way and have it be symmetrical. So what we're going to do right now is kind of going to happen pretty quickly, but we're going to attempt to carve a pumpkin with some different shapes. There's going to be organic shapes, geometric shapes, but we're going to kind of do this. And while we're doing this, do remember that on the inside of this thing, this is where the fun is. When you get the guts outside, and remember, if you have a kit, and a lot of stores have kits like this now, but you can get a scooper. But one of the fun things about this time of year is taking the pumpkins and actually getting your hands in there, then taking all of the guts, and you want to separate the seeds. And those of you that are extra adventurous will take the seeds and separate them, and you kind of dry them out, you roast them, you salt them up, and there's nothing better than a fresh roasted pumpkin seed, but just a little dash of salt on there, or whatever other spices you prefer to put on there. So, once again, you really want to make sure that you've got some adult supervision if you're not old enough to be using these utensils on your own. Make sure that you've got implements that are safe to use and you are comfortable using them. Otherwise, you can come up with the designs and you can have your parents or another adult cut out the designs that you come up with. So I think I'm going to go with the sturdier little saw, and let's go ahead and we'll see how this turns out, all right? So first of all, we're going to work on some eyes. Oh, great. They've got the under pressure music right there. We're going to work on the nose. We'll see if we can get this thing going. And sometimes it's a little bit easier when you're determined. There we go. We're going to get it. And we're going to get some other things going here. We're going to work on the eye. I know the music stops, so they think I'm going to be done, but I'm going to keep on going on this. You got to get some of the guts and stuff out of there. All right? So, anyway, we've got all that. Are you ready for it? All right. So here we go. So we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to see what kind of a carving we did here. So, easy enough. The eyes come out circular, and I guess we'll put it that way. So that way you can see it a little bit easier. And much like, you know what, because the inspiration came from Derek, even though he wanted a set of triangular eyes, we went with circular eyes so that we could get a couple of different shapes on there. We've got the triangular nose, and then we've got the organic mouth, but the teeth are going to remain square. And so you can see that the mouth is, so they're talking about, yeah, you know what, that could be part of a half circle right there. And once again, when we're talking about when you take the top off with the stem and you are going in there and you are digging everything out with your hands or the scoop or the spoon, whatever you like, that is the volume of the inside of the pumpkin. Now, how much stuff you can fit inside of that. I've not yet seen a trick-or-treater come around with their own hand-carved pumpkin trying to put candy inside of this thing. That would be quite a thing. You know what? If a kid came by with a hand-carved pumpkin, something like this, they would get more than a piece of candy. They'd get a couple of pieces of candy. And you know what? As a matter of fact, it's a lot of fun. So if you do have an opportunity and you would like to carve a pumpkin, whether or not you celebrate the holiday is not the issue, but simply learning about pumpkins, learning about how they grow, learning about the math behind pumpkins, having some fun looking at the science side of it also. And there you go. That is our Do the Math pumpkin activity for today. We'll be back with more right after this.